It was very insightful, thank you. So I'm not going to do a big introduction for our last two speakers. You all know who they are. They are actually the most researched people I know, I've got to say. So can we just do a huge round of applause for Kat Watkins and Kim Isherwood. Woo!
Okay guys, so I am wary of the time. I was going to play a video at the beginning. I don't know if we're going to have time, 6-minute video. Should we just go straight?
Go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Right, okay. This video is important because this is where comprehensive sexuality actually, showing you where it's come from. These are the people involved in promoting it and actually, well, they're the activists for it. So let's have a look who they are.
Parents would feel that a developed consideration for children would involve leaving children alone sexually to find their own way for themselves with their own peer groups and not with adults.
Yes, I would be all in favour of children finding their own way sexually, but I think also that adults have a part to play because children are one part of the whole society. It isn't a society where we separate children from adults.
What do you view?
I feel that PI is not a procurement agency for children, never has been and never will be. Our political objectives include developing a society where children are given a much higher status than today, where they're recognised as individuals in their own right, and this includes recognising their right to certain sexual freedoms, whilst protecting them from the kind of criminal assaults which took place in Brighton.
But surely it's a question of recognising children's maturity, and how can you have an equal relationship, which is what I take a mature sexual relationship to be, between an adult and a child who is not mature in body, in mind, or personal awareness? It has to be unequal.
I don't accept that this concept of maturity at all. Adults, for instance, aren't necessarily mature. It's a long process.
Well, I take it for granted that no adult is probably ever mature, but nevertheless my state of maturity, or your state of maturity, is clearly different from that of a child of 12. How can there be an equal relationship which allows of sex, which is usually a shocking experience for everybody at some time or another? How can you allow an equal relationship between two people so unequally positioned at the starting off point?
I don't accept that sex is a spontaneously shocking experience.
Well, at some stage or other, there is an element of shocking sex.
Not if children are properly educated about sex, and it's an obligation on society to see that children are given a far more comprehensive sexual education from a far earlier age.
So in that case, they find it out, they discover this with people of their own age and in their own time. This is a question of inequality, which I come back to, which I think you have answered.
Indeed, by your lights, the relationship is unequal in the same way that a teacher-child relationship is unequal, in the same way that a parent-child relationship is unequal.
The teacher's not exploiting the child's sexuality.
And nor is a pedophile. Pedophiles do not exploit children.
Using the child's sexuality.
No, pedophiles do not use a child's sexuality. Pedophiles develop a mutual sexuality with the child. It's an entirely reciprocal relationship.
But you can't say that because of this business of immaturity, relationship.
Yes, but the definition of maturity is yours, we don't share it.
Well, what is your definition of maturity in this context? So how can a child of 12 make a mature judgment about something like sex for the first time, which it has not the first idea about, and cannot possibly weigh the consequences of it?
You're imputing to a sexual relationship heavy judgmental issues.
No, I'm talking about a physical and psychical response.
Yes. A child is able to recognise a pleasurable experience. He is able to recognise a pleasing emotional experience. He is able to express consent and to recognise that this is something he wishes to continue. And a responsible, caring pedophile it always refers to the wishes of the child.
But even today, Tom O'Carroll argues he and other paedophiles should be allowed to have sex with children.
You keep saying, by the way, it's sex with children. It's not sex with children. It's sex, most people think, is sexual intercourse penis in vagina and a guy banging away until he gets orgasm. That's not what I mean by sex with children.
What are you talking
And I don't think we should talk in this sort of emotive fashion about sex with children.
What is a less emotive term?
Erotic contact with children.
And what would that involve?
Well, it might involve touching or masturbation.
In the warped view of the pedophile information exchange, the only harm caused by an adult having sex with a child occurs later, when the child is supposedly made to feel guilty about it.
If they were traumatised, they wouldn't have gone along.
You see, that's another lie that pedophiles spin. They say that the kids aren't traumatised.
No, wait a moment.
Believe me, they are traumatised, Tom.
Yes, but many years later, as a result of being told, it matters because they would not have been traumatised, but for being told that they had been abused.
So this is the point. You'd say that it's not the pedophile that's caused the abuse, it's the responsible authorities like the police.
Yes,
and the parents.
absolutely.
So you don't accept that having sex with a child can cause any kind of...
Let me tell you, we're getting peculiarly hysterical. Many years later, when people are told that they have been abused and it keeps being rammed into them from the media all the time, then that is the feeling they come to get. They come to think that I must be traumatised because people keep telling me so.
Okay.
That's how it happened.
Can I put to you, there's something in your book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section in your book where you describe the scenario of a little girl sitting on a man's knee.
Yes.
And you describe approvingly how sexual relations with that little girl can be, quote, negotiated by hints and signals, such as complimenting her on her knickers and testing her response.
Yeah.
And what would be the adequate response from that little girl, Tom?
Enthusiasm.
What would that constitute? How would the little girl show you enthusiasm for you wanting to have sex with her?
Let's move away from...
No. Let's stick to this issue.
Well, all right. Let's stick with the issue, but let me address it in my own way.
The little girl's sitting on your knee, and you've just told her, "I like your knickers."
Let me address it in my own way.
What does that little girl do to indicate that she's willing to consent to have sex with you, Tom?
How does somebody indicate willingness to have consent to anything?
A little girl cannot possibly be a consenting partner in that kind of power relationship. She's sitting on your knee, for God's sake.
Yes,
You're an adult.
Yes, she can.
You used the term enthusiasm. What does that little girl do to indicate that she's enthusiastic?
I think that we're going round and round in circles.
No, what is the answer?
We're going round and round in circles. I've given you my answer multiple times, so I'll finish there.
Which is a non-answer. You just can't answer.
Well, you think it's a non-answer. I think it's an answer.
So this is the area where my line of work comes in. I'm a criminologist. I specialise in child sex abuse, institutional abuse, perpetrators of abuse. I firmly believe that you can only safeguard a child from sexual abuse if you understand the mind of a perpetrator. Here we are producing policies based off stories of victims. Victim stories are important, yes they are. We need to understand the damage, okay? But a victim will never, ever, ever understand the grooming process. They'll never understand what the perpetrator's thinking of, the tactics they use and things like that. So that's where my line of work comes in. So when I'm dealing with stuff with the small children then in school like this, PANTS. Now PANTS used to be a really good programme. Privates are private, okay? Nobody looks, touches or talks about your privates. But it's not that anymore, is it? It's changed. We are now introducing terminology for genitalia because apparently it safeguards. So think back to Tom O'Carroll now. What's going to happen when a child can confidently discuss their genitalia? What do the paedophiles think that is? They think it's consent. Now, I do not object to the teaching of correct terminology if that's what you want to teach your child, okay? Just be mindful of what they will see on the internet. The problem lies when we're teaching all children the same terminology for their genitalia, because then we have given predators passwords. So as you know, this stuff is promoted by the NSPCC. So for 4 years, I began challenging the NSPCC. So I took the approach through the contact forms. There is no direct line to these people. So I went through the contact forms. First of all, I wasn't getting any response. Then I took the more, a year later I think it was, I took the more professional approach. I told them I was an RSE teacher, trainer, criminologist, and I need that evidence to prove there's safeguards. I've got paedophiles after paedophile after paedophile, study after study after study of paedophiles telling me they use stuff like this to engage children in activities. So if I've read all this stuff for the last 13 years, and now I'm coming across this through the NSPCC, I need the evidence. I need to know I'm wrong. I need to know I'm wrong, and I need to know they are right. Well, this evidence didn't come for a long time. Emails were exchanged, I'd gone back and forth, I even started challenging their posts on social media. All of their sponsored posts I was challenging. They could not give me the evidence. They said, this one here, they said in October 23 they'd get back to me in 10 working days. I emailed them again in December, this is a long working day. So here I am, I had a contact from somebody on Facebook, they'd given me this email address, I want the evidence to prove that there's safeguards. So it just keeps going on and on and on, like there was none. Finally, 4 years later, 4 years later they give me this evidence. 2 studies, written by an academic called Walsh, in New South Wales in Australia. It says nothing in there about correct terminology. It says nothing in there about good touch, bad touch. It says nothing in there about consent. Do you know what these studies are? They're an overview of sexual prevention programs in school. These are not worth the paper. They might be worth the paper they've written on for Australia. If they're looking at the sexual prevention programs there is nothing in there to tell us that teaching children correct terminology safeguards them. And that's something we've got a massive problem with. So I wrote back to them again and I asked them, would you be prepared to answer some questions regarding this? And they completely tapped out. They were not prepared to answer any questions at all on that. Then we were contacted by some guy called Derek Thomas from Parliament. He hadn't seen it actually, one of his constituents had seen a podcast where I'd explained the correct terminology. So they had gone to him. He had come to me asking me for the evidence. So I said, well, if you're prepared to learn, I'm happy to teach you. But you better have a lot of time, you better be prepared to do all the reading. It's not in one study, it's in hundreds of studies. So I said, better still, I said, why don't you go and ask the Department for Education for the evidence? So he went to the Department of Education for the evidence. This was the response to the Department of Education. Teaching about body parts is often taught alongside education about privacy and boundaries, and the differences between appropriate and inappropriate and unsafe physical and other contact. Pupils are taught how to recognise and report feelings of being unsafe and how to ask for advice or help for themselves or others. We want children to be able to report concerns or abuse, and we have the vocabulary and confidence needed to do so. Again, there's no evidence. This is a big safeguarding thing that they are promoting, that they are sponsoring, that they've got teachers out there delivering to your children. There is a social worker from Somerset, Jock, 23 years in children's services, writing all over social media how important it is to teach your children correct terminology, because this is the experience he has from working with perpetrators. I thought you've been working in children's services the last 23 years. Which one is it? You don't work with perpetrators if you're in children's services. So again, that's just hearsay, that's another big fat lie. We've got our RSE consultant, Ian Timbrell, as well. He promotes this stuff on his website. Again, no evidence to support any of it. So when we are teaching small children the same terminology for their genitalia amongst adults, a different adult every year in school, strangers confidently discussing their genitalia, that child has now become fair game. We are grooming our children under the guise of safeguarding. So then this is another thing that really bothers me. This is another thing that bothers me. Self-stimulation. This was in 241 schools in England. This package is also being used in Bari, okay? The All About Me package is being used there as well. So this particular part, again, is supposed to be safeguarding. There are also rules about touching yourself too. Now lots of people like to tickle or stroke themselves as it might feel nice. They might play with their hair, stroke their skin, or they may even touch their private parts. This is really very normal. However, some people may get cross or say that it's dirty, especially when you touch your own privates. This is strange as it's really very normal. However, it is not polite to do it when other people are about. It is something we should only do when we're alone, perhaps in a bath or shower or in bed, a bit like picking your nose. It is certainly not polite to do in the class when everyone's watching. Now, let me just address this. There are children who touch themselves, okay? There are. But some children are doing it just because they do. It's just distract them, all right? Just distract them. Some people are doing it because they've got a medical condition. Some people are doing it because they've been neglected. And some are doing it because they've been abused. All right? And as teachers and safeguarders, we are looking for these behaviours in children. It's called a non-verbal disclosure, okay? But now we've just programmed every 4-year-old not to do it in the classroom. We have just failed an entire nation of children.
Wow.
So that was the younger children. That's the bit I've got a massive problem with. Now we want to show you now what has come to us. So we're going to go up now to the comprehensive age children, and then Kath is going to address that.
And what happens in school last week?
The teaching saying no sex, I think. That's what very sure it was.
So, what lesson was it? Was it helpful?
Sweet.
What's it called?
Sweet. I don't know what it stands for.
What? S-W-E?
S-W-E-E-T.
As in sweet. That's what your lesson's called. Was it your original teachers or was it outsourced?
This is my real teacher.
So it was your real teacher. And what did they tell you to do exactly?
Search your thing or sex on my phone.
They told you to take your phone out and search.
Search your app.
And what did you do?
Nothing. I walked out.
You walked up to the class. So, what will happen to you now if you walk out to the class? Will you get in? Will you have detention or?
Detention.
Well, you had detention for it.
No, not yet. But they will. They will start with detention.
Why? What have they said? What did they say to you for walking out?
Nothing. She said you're not supposed to walk out. I had to go back in there.
And what did they make you do then when you went back in there?
Nothing. I refused to do it.
You refused to do it. Does everyone else do it or?
Yeah.
So they all said it. What were they all saying? Were they?
The one girl said but she couldn't do it because of the search history on her phone. And then all the rest will search her on laptops.
And what were they saying about it? Did they have to have a discussion or anything about it after? Or?
I don't know. I wasn't in there.
Oh, you left?
Yeah.
And nobody else walked out with you?
No. The boys were running around most of the day.
So they were messing around tonight. Did you want to do it? Do you think anyone else wanted to do it? No. Well, let me know what happens. If they give you detention, tell them you've got rights and you don't have to learn that. You've got rights as a child. If you don't want to learn that, tell them.
So that's the 15-year-olds getting detention because they don't want to stay in a lesson on porn. 14-year-olds. So this is a screenshot of social media. It's not hearsay. I'll be completely honest with you. This is a school my son used to attend. Today, my 14-year-old son had a lesson which a teacher told him he can identify as a cat, a zebra, or a kangaroo if he wants to. Then, in another lesson, they were given literature that states that adults use gags and handcuffs during sex, and that sometimes 3 or more people can partake in sex together. The class was then told to write down the names of 5 men and 5 women they find attractive, regardless of their sexual orientation. This stuff is real.
Yeah.
Let's look at the 12 and 13-year-olds, shall we? video was sent to us by a 12-year-old boy. We've got 12 and 13-year-olds written there because that was the age group. This 12-year-old boy said he didn't want to do it, he was traumatised, and the teacher said, tough, you have to do it. So that's age 12 to 13. Don't forget, age 12 is statutory rape age in this country. And then, last but not least, we've had a 12-year-old girl who walked out of lessons on porn, and she was told she was breaching the children's right to an education. So this is pretty much what our children are dealing with in schools right now, and Cal is going to cover some other dangerous things for you.
So yeah, guys, yeah, well done, Kevin. So yeah, this is absolutely true. They are teaching pornography in school, and if it was the dangers of pornography, I wouldn't have an issue. Unfortunately, it's not the dangers of pornography. They're encouraging them, as you've just seen. So I don't know if any of you saw a couple of, I think it was 2 years ago, Miriam Cates went into Parliament and she read out some of the lesson content that was being put into the schools in England for 12-year-olds and upwards, from, I think it was School of Sexuality Education. There's many different ones. All of them are unregulated and unvetted, by the way. I just want to read some of the things that are in this lesson. Bear in mind, 12-year-olds. Breathe, breathe, breathe. This is talking about anal sex, obviously. The key to enjoying anything that goes in your butt is to be relaxed. I am sorry, this is really graphic, but you need to know. Your anus tightens when you are nervous, even in a non-sexual setting, and if it's tight, there's no hope. If you do still try, it's going to hurt. Don't go straight into the full-on penis in butts. 12, by the way. Sorry, I just have to keep bringing that back. That will be a little bit of a shock. Play with your partner or by yourself with toys or fingers first. Get your body used to something going in instead of just things coming out. This was advice to the RSE teacher. It can be a good idea to leave feelings until last, but not always. For others, good sex is quick, rough, and anonymous. 12 years old, by the way. They're under the age of consent for a start. If you're saying 16 years old, I believe that's far too young anyway, but if we're going on the law, 12.
Statutory rape age.
Yeah. You can also explore the fact that some people enjoy feeling pain during sex, which is often referred to as kink or BDSM. As with all sexual practices, what matters is that sex is consensual. What did Kim say about consent? Teaching 3-year-olds how to consent? Very, very, very dangerous. So this was just a side note for, I think, the School of, the Department of Education. This was just comments on there, what was picked up through it. And as this document has shown, and I read it all, and it does show all this, I've just picked some bits out. As this document has shown, some of the results are indeed truly alarming, including the promotion or incautious introduction of trans identity, anal sex, pornography, sex toys, group sex, masturbation, drag shows, choking, explicit imagery, surrogacy, kink and BDSM. All of this stuff is in there. This one here, another one. So they're basically teaching your children how to choke each other during sex safely, 12 years old. During choking, your brain is being starved of vital oxygen, which can induce a lucid yet semi-hallucinogenic state and may cause you to fade in and out of consciousness and may create a feeling of euphoria. The high that people experience soon after is due to the release of oxygen flowing back and the body exhaling. With an exhale, there is a release of dopamine and serotonin that can lead to a nice sensation as the body tries to recover itself. So they're promoting and encouraging this stuff. You can die from this. People die. Thousands of people die from this every year. And they're teaching children this. So I've only got a few minutes, so I'm not going to go too much into this. I have done a proper presentation on this, and I'll tell you where to get it. But these are how porn affects the brain, literally brain damage. It causes brain damage. It causes a process of desensitization, and much of you will probably understand what happens here. Exactly the same with a drug as well. So because you build tolerance to a drug, you need more of it to get that same high. It's exactly the same as addiction to pornography. You start off with something soft, that doesn't arouse you anymore because you become desensitized to it, so you need something stronger and harder. And this is why we end up in I can't even say some of the genres of pornography that are out there. They're absolutely sick to the core. They really are, and I know some of you know what they are. So it obviously pushes the consumer. There's a demand that's created. And this is obviously from this, because what happens is, it numbs the pleasure response in the brain. So when you're overstimulating one part of the brain, which is the reward center, you're taking away from another part. And the bit you're taking away from is the prefrontal cortex. Now the prefrontal cortex is like the chief exec of the brain, you know, it evaluates risk, reward and danger, you know, it's why it's not even developed until you're, I think, probably about 25, mid-20s. So in children, it's not developed at all. So if you can cause brain damage to an adult, introducing pornography to an adult, can you imagine how a child's brain is being rewired before this has even been developed, before it's even been established? So they did a science experiment called the Coolidge effect, and they did this on rats and then they did it on humans. And what they did was in a tank of rats, they put female rats on heat and then one male rat. The one male rat mated with every single female rat in there until it was absolutely exhausted, and then it passed out. And even when the other female rat still wanted to go, the male rat didn't, until a new female rat on heat was put into there, and then it got up straight away and mated with that female rat. So they did this to humans, and what they did was took healthy volunteers, they sat them in front of a screen, they would just put in one you know, explicit picture on the screen, and they were showing that until the subject lost arousal, and then without telling them, they quickly changed the picture to something stronger, and then the subject maintained arousal, showing that you lose that tolerance, but when you put something stronger there, you get it back, which is why we end up in the realms of what they call child pornography, which is not child pornography at all. It's obviously children being raped and tortured online for people to enjoy, and that's the most, you know, it deviates from the norm of anything, and that's where people get to this stage. Habituation is just basically when you get bored. Same thing as desensitization, really. You just become bored of it and you need something stronger and harder to be able to maintain that arousal. This is a video, we don't need to watch this really. It's just, yeah, put it on. It's only 30 seconds. This was from a documentary I watched called I Married a Paedophile. So bearing in mind, this man, he was a family man, I think he was a teacher. Family man, he had 2 teenage daughters, I think. And just listen to what he says, it's only about 20 seconds.
Than you had public porn probably 10 years ago. And at the time I was just looking at normal adult material, but as I got bored with that, I looked for more extreme material. I kept trying to stop, but would always end up going back to it when things went wrong at work or in other parts of my life.
So I just butt in there now because you just heard from that guy there that he got bored and he went on to other things. You will hear stories from some psychologists that a paedophile is born. But those psychologists didn't scan that brain before that brain was exposed to something. So they can't find these same images on a baby brain. So I would argue a paedophile is not born. A paedophile is created through the things they're exposed to, the rewiring of their brains, and this is why we've got children assaulting other children. They are suffering with brain damage, brain shrinkage.
Yeah, they really, really are. So talking about hypofrontality, it doesn't just correlate with pornography watching, it actually, watching pornography causes the brain the prefrontal cortex to become less than normal, and I'll show you some photos in a minute to prove that. So obviously, if you know, this is why teenagers are so risky as well. They got no prefrontal cortex, so the behaviour is erratic anyway. So when